walks away after winning his 100th game as the head coach here at Notre Dame.
The reason I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, I was born in this country. It isn't what you have, it's what you're taught about the values of life.
We trying to save souls.
So there's a rule in life that you're either growing or you're dying. And like an old friend once said, we as Americans need to start winning again. Everyone should ask this question. Am I willing to endure the pain and the suffering and the sacrifice it takes to be a champion? Greetings and welcome to the Lou Holtz podcast. We have a great guest with us today, but I just want to remind people, it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, if you're white, black, yellow, any color in between. This is not about politics. It's about restoring the culture of this country to what made us great. We're very blessed today to have with us Congressman Fry. He put himself through the undergraduate education at the University of South Carolina and law school at Charleston School of Law, where the school achieved its American Bar Association accreditation and also received the prestigious Civility Award. Every day he strives towards a goal that he wants to leave his country better than he found it. Russell is a public servant and active member of this community. Prior to this role, he represented the State House District 6 in Horry, South Carolina, where for 7 years he served as Chief Majority Whip, where he fought for lower taxes, less government, pro-Second Amendment legislation, and pro-life. Russell also chaired the House Opioid Abuse Prevention Study Committee. I could go on and on. Congressman Fry, thank you so much for being here. You want to tell me what really got you involved in the opioid?
Well, the opioid thing, this area, the Myrtle Beach area of South Carolina, was the hardest hit in the state. And I looked around and I said, well, my gosh, what's being done about this? Who's leading the charge on trying to fix this? And no one really was at the time. So we jumped in, myself and 4 others, and trying to cobble together some statewide response that we would have.
In South Carolina, lawmakers also trying to combat policies related to the opioid crisis. One approach includes working with doctors on how they prescribe medicine for long-term chronic pain. That's important because the longer a person is on a medication, the easier it is to become addicted. And the problem is even tougher to tackle in rural areas because of access to medical care.
And from that, the Speaker of the House put together a committee. We had a ton of legislation go through. It was really great. And we had these hearings, Coach. And I think that was the thing that touched me the most in this process was we would have these hearings and we would do field hearings. So we would be in Greenville or Columbia or Myrtle Beach or Charleston. And we would always start off with and end every committee with families that were impacted, people who were addicted at one point but now in some sort of recovery. And to hear those stories, I think this doesn't touch red or blue America or black or white. It really touches everybody. And there's not a single person that we know that has not been impacted in some way by this epidemic. And so we jumped in to the deep end and figured out how to swim. And it resulted, quite frankly, in some really good public policy. But the goal was obviously to save lives. If you could do all this effort and save one person's life, that they get that second breath to get on a road to recovery, to get back integrated into society, then you will have done your job. And that was our objective the entire time.
How good you must feel to know that you save people's lives, because on TV all the time you see people rushing into on 9/11 to burning buildings to save people's lives. But you're doing exactly the same thing. You don't rush into burning buildings, but saving people's lives. Now, you've had an impressive career in politics. Could you share a bit about your journey and what inspired you to pursue a career in public service?
Well, great question, Coach. One, I'm a child of 9/11. I was in high school when the country was attacked, and I remember it well. And I remember the feeling around the country at the time afterwards. This kind of rally around the flagpole effect. People were holding doors open for each other. They were going to church again. They were donating blood. And between that and the fact that I was in Boy Scouts, which it helps instill an appreciation for this special place that we live called America, I think those had a very profound effect on me as a youngster. And that no matter what you do, it's like the old Eagle Scout slogan goes, is that you leave your campsite better than you found it. Whether you're in public service, whether you serve in the military, whether you're just a congregant at your church, everyone has a role to play to make sure that you leave the campsite better than you found it. You leave your church, your community, your state, your country better than you found it. We owe it to our forefathers to honor their legacy by doing that for the next generation.
I got to ask you this. Do you realize how hard it is to become an Eagle Scout, and how did that come about? Because very seldom do I ever meet an Eagle Scout that isn't ultra successful in every phase of his life. So for you to achieve an Eagle Scout, that impresses me, because as a Boy Scout, I wasn't an Eagle Scout, but how hard that is and what you really learned about being an Eagle Scout.
It's Coach, it's actually on my wall in my congressional office. It's something I'm incredibly proud of. And it wasn't easy. I mean, I did a nature trail as my Eagle Scout project, and it was about 1.5 miles that we had to forge through the woods for pedestrians, for horses, and I kind of bit off a little bit more than I can chew. I was coming up on my 18th birthday, which you have to have your Eagle before you turn 18, and there were so many times, weekends, I was relying on help, which was great, but during the week, after school, I'd have to go out there and hack away at a couple more feet, put down some mulch, and we got it done by the skin of our teeth. But it wasn't an easy project for sure.
No, it wasn't. That's why there's so few of them. But congratulations on it. As a former coach myself, I know the importance of teamwork and leadership. How do you encourage teamwork in the often divided area of Congress? How do you get people to come together? Because I know how hard it is with a team, let alone with politicians.
Coach, it's a great question. And I got asked this a couple weeks ago, and they said, why, so divided. When can you come together? Why can't you sit down and come together? And I said, well, first of all, we had some votes today. Do you know what we voted on? And they said, no. I said, well, most people don't either, because the vote was unanimous, right? So there are pieces of legislation, public policy that are unanimous or close to unanimous, where people are actually working together. But I always tell a story, Coach, and I think this is important, is that people see the world very differently. Even amongst political parties, within political parties, they see the world very differently. But there's always an avenue to work together for the good of the country, for good public policy. When I was in the State House, I had a piece of legislation. It was on human trafficking, and I got it through the House, no problem. Got it through most of the Senate, no problem. But it was on the floor, and it was being held up. And there was an unlikely partner. I'm a white Republican, and there was a black female Democrat who said, where's our bill at? What's going on with that? And I said, well, it's being held up. I don't know why. I can't figure out how to unstick it, if you will. And I'm just at a loss. And she said, well, who is it that's holding it up? And I told her. And it happened to be her state senator. And so she went over there. She went over to the Senate and I think gave him a piece of her mind. And he released the bill that day. And so politics has a strange way of, and that was a great bill. I mean, South Carolina was considered to be the most improved state in the country that year in dealing with human trafficking. And look, I did a lot of the work to get it to where it was, but that last little, that goal line stand to get it through the Senate and to the governor's desk was from an unlikely partner in good public policy.
It's just like athletics, politics, that not everything's going to be easy, and you have to work with other people, and your help comes from the least likely expected group. But what legislative goal have you set for yourself?
Well, in Congress, a couple things. I think it's really important, and I grew up with meager means, working class family. We've got to get a handle on our debt, and our debt has so many impacts. You look at the inflation rate that we have. You look at the price of goods and services. You look at the cost of groceries and how much it costs to heat and cool your house, and the price to fill up your tank or heat and cool your home. These are all things that are symptomatic of a debt problem in this country. And I'm one of 435 in Congress, but I really think that the country, the Congress, owes it to the next generation that we've got to be the first group to really get serious about tackling this debt. I really want to see that through. I know it's big, and I'm a small part of that, but people expect it. And the solvency of the country, the benefits and the freedoms that we enjoy are all at risk because of our debt, our addiction to spending in Washington, D.C. I think we've got to fix that. Two, look, I think obviously I've done tremendous work in the opioid space in the state legislature. I want to continue that. And the mantra within the office is, and whatever public policy that we touch, is how can we be effective today? Not tomorrow or next week or next year. Obviously, we plan for those too, but we're here for a limited time. However that ends, my career in the Congress, however that ends, I want to look back and say we left it all out on the field. We did exactly what we said that we were going to do. We worked our tails off, and if we can leave it a little bit better for the next generation, that's the goal.
Well, I lived in that state for 6 years. South Carolina is just a tremendous state. You have the mountains, you have the ocean, you have great people, you have pretty good weather year-round. It goes on. Now, South Carolina has its own unique set of challenges and opportunities. I know that. What are some of the key issues facing your constituents, and how do you prioritize them in your work?
Well, from the district perspective, obviously the area that I represent is very tourism reliant. We've got Myrtle Beach, but it's also very rural and agricultural. And when you go to some of these small towns in the rural part of South Carolina in the PD region, you see very quickly they're all different, they're all unique, but you see some similar things, right? That they're not equipped to handle the challenges that they face. They don't have enough police officers. They don't have professional people that are seeking out grants and opportunities for small town America. And if we're going to revitalize small town America, which I think is the backbone, quite frankly, of our country, then we need to figure out a way to do that. And that's infrastructure for sure. Roads, bridges, ports, airports. That's education. Most of that's done at the state level. And to the extent that the federal government is involved, which is arguable, that they should be providing the flexibility to states to make sure that a kid's zip code doesn't determine the quality of education that they receive. These are things, and of course, economic development. People want opportunity. They're not going to live in an area that doesn't have access to health care, that has deplorable road conditions, can't educate their children, and has no jobs. And so economic development is huge. Obviously, the Sun Belt, South Carolina and a lot of the southern states are doing very well. But in this particular region, it could be doing a little bit better. And when people have that opportunity, they're happy to move to rural South Carolina when they have jobs in education and roads and healthcare. They're happy to do that. And we're starting to see an influx into these areas, but it's not enough. We need to do more. And if we're going to protect small towns in this district, but really across the country, we got to get serious about making sure that they're vibrant and stable.
Well, as a resident of South Carolina, I want to say to everybody from all over the country, you can't find a better place or nicer people than the state of South Carolina. Now, the role of government's often debated. From your perspective, what is the most significant role government plays in the lives of everyday Americans? Because that's one of the biggest problems we have, or one of the biggest, is the role that the government plays. What is your feeling?
Well, my feeling is that the government that governs least governs the best. I think the private sector and individuals have the power of planning, have the power of thought, have the power to choose, to make sure that they're doing, and so government should be very limited, and it should be. And what should government focus on? Certainly improving the lives of citizens, but how does that look? Well, there are certain core functions that government does and has always done, right? These are courts, these are roads, this is the post office from the federal side. These are the things that actually make it turn. And it is frustrating to me when I hear from small business owners or when I hear from people that work in a manufacturing facility and they look at this very big, very giant government that almost seems to be oppressive in the way that it regulates, the way that it tells citizens what they can and can't do. Look, people, I think, are naturally good at their core. They want to do the right thing, and you don't always need to have a government solution for every ailment that is happening within the country. You need to empower individuals to make the right choice. You need to empower states, quite frankly, too, and have less of this centralized power in D.C. So from a general philosophical standpoint, I just tend to think that a hands-off approach on most things, except for core functions of government, you should tread very carefully when you want to engage in those spaces.
Now, you've really introduced Protect the Ball Act, provide some regulations around the NCAA and the NIL. What inspired you to take on this issue? Because this is one that's very dear to me as well. I think we're ruining college athletics as I know it, but we'll have a discussion here. But what caused you to get motivated to take on this Protect the Ball
Well,
bill?
Coach, I'm a fan of yours. I was in college when you were the coach at USC. I love college sports. I think the world about what it does. Certainly the fans enjoy it, but also about the athletes themselves and the character that they build on these teams, furthering their career. Most people will never go pro or they'll never do anything professionally with the sport that they're engaged in, but the teamwork is so critical to that learning experience. And right now, Coach, I think the NCAA was wrong probably in its assessment years ago, and obviously the Supreme Court has said this, that you can't not pay players, you can't let them market their skills. But now, Coach, you know this, it's like the Wild West. And every time that the NCAA, a conference, a school, even a state, the states have been passing NIL legislation for years, but it shifts. And you don't have a firm foundation on which college sports rests right now. It's on quicksand. And so are players considered employees of the university? That's a legal question before the courts. Are players allowed to unionize? That's another question. And so it's really frustrating that you have 50 states with 50 different solutions to how to address college sports. None of them match up. A lot of them are protective of their in-state schools, which isn't good for college athletics generally. You've got the players and the families that there's going to be ESPN, I'm sure, stories about how somebody was taken advantage of because there's just no framework right now around this. And it's frustrating to see. I think you're right that college sports is in a downward trajectory right now unless we get a handle on this. So this bill is quite simple. Let's stop with the lawsuits. Let's allow some oxygen in the room so that the conferences, the schools, the players, their families can come up with some common things, a framework around college sports on the structure. Let's dispense with the silly lawsuits and let's get down to making sure that in this post NCAA era where you can now pay players, that people have a framework in which they can operate. And right now we don't have that. And the net result is that it hurts the schools. They're on the hook for the money. It hurts the sports because some of these schools are not going to be able to afford these sports anymore. It hurts the players and their families, of course, and it hurts the fans who really love college sports.
I could agree with you more. You expressed it so elegantly, but let me give you my thoughts on this thing. Why did we have college athletics? Why was athletics involved in a college? Because it was a great educational experience. You learned so much about teamwork, about unselfishness, about getting knocked down, about perseverance. The list goes on and on. And that's why we had college athletics, because of the lessons you learned. However, now we're getting away from that because all they're worried about now, how much money am I going to get? I was always of the opinion that it wasn't a 4-year decision, it was a 40-year decision. You decide to go to the University of South Carolina or Clemson, whichever case, because you want that as part of your livelihood. You want that as part of your legacy. You want to have the contact from those people, and the list goes on and on. But no, now it's all about money, and it's not really really true. But I hope we can do something because nobody has enough money. Congressman Fry, nobody. I was very poor. My dad had a third-grade education, but you know what? We learned to buy what we needed or what we could afford, not what we wanted. And people would say, in college, you need a haircut. I say, I don't need a haircut. Look in the mirror. I don't look in the mirror. I look at my wallet. My wallet said, you don't need a haircut. And that's what we have to learn. Those were great lessons we learned along that line. What are you hoping that Protect the Ball Act will accomplish if passed?
Well, what I hope that it accomplishes is that it stops the litany of litigation, that it allows for discussions to take place on, since the Supreme Court ruled the way that they did, that it allows all these individuals and all these entities to come together and kind of come up with their framework. You obviously have the NFL, you have NASCAR, everyone has their guidelines, their rules, their structure. Right now, college sports doesn't seem to have that, and they haven't had it for a while. And part of the fear is that any time that you act as a state or as a conference or in whatever governing body you're in, the rules change almost instantaneously under your feet. And so it's just, if we're going to get back to the basics with college sports, we need to make sure that there's that oxygen in the room, that people can talk, that they can form their own structure, and that they can move, they can move on, and that we preserve college sports. That's my objective.
I agree with you completely. And this, the people that could transfer to school without any penalties is ridiculous. All you do is you change the address to your problem. There was a quarterback that started at 4 different schools in 4 different years. And what in the world did he learn? What relationships did he have with his teammates? The list goes on and on. But in any event, you chaired the House Opioid Abuse Prevention Study Committee, which is very, very important, which resulted in 18 policy initiatives being signed into law. Tell me about how you got this done and the advantages of it.
Well, it's, again, I think going back to, if we can save one life, then it's all worth it. And when we formed this committee, we toured the state, we listened to educators, we listened to law enforcement, we listened to medical professionals, really all the people that know the things that we should know. And we listened, and we didn't speak, we just listened, and we absorbed the information. And then we also looked at other states. What are other states doing to deal with this? We're not unique in this space. We're not unique in the challenges of an opioid epidemic. Now it's fentanyl, which is way out of control, which wasn't really anticipated back then. But how do you go about having a statewide response? And because of that, we had great help from our governor. We had, I would say, a lot of wind in the sails, and we were able to pass these bills. And one of the bills, and this is how I know it's just so impactful, I practice law, and I had a paralegal come in one day, and she said, Russell, I just saw the most miraculous thing. And I said, what happened? She said, well, there was a man who came out of the woods, and his face was blue, and he couldn't breathe, and I pulled over, and I stopped the car, and I was screaming for help, and out of the woods comes a gentleman who had Narcan, which allows you, it reverses an overdose. And they were able to apply the Narcan to this individual. And that day, and I don't know who this person was, and I don't know where he's at today, but on that day, that access to Narcan gave him a second breath, gave him a second chance. And sometimes it takes 2 or 3 or 4 times for people to get back on their feet. Sometimes it only takes 1. But having the life is better than no life at all.
What's really amazing is we talk about the life and death issues, but we also ruin an awful lot of people's lives by allowing them to turn to drugs along that line. But many young people today are disillusioned with politics. What in the world do you tell them how they can make a difference?
Great question, Coach. I'm 39, so in Congress years, I'm a pretty young guy. And I always tell people succinctly that if you're not at the table, that you're on the menu. And for our generation, it's true. And for our generation and for those that are younger than me, they're going to be living in this country a lot longer than others. And if you're not engaged in wanting to better your community, your state, your country, then you're really missing out. That politics, as weird as it is and as fractured as it is sometimes, it's important to understand what you believe, to think clearly about what you believe and go through it, challenge yourself, challenge your personal growth, because the decisions that are made today, particularly for the youth, are going to impact them the most. And so it's important to get engaged. It's not easy to understand all the weird nuances that happen in public policy, but it's an educational journey for everybody, and they should definitely take part. An informed citizenry, as our founding fathers talked about, is crucial to the survival of the republic. And if we're going to have our better days would still be ahead of us, then that informed citizenry is incredibly crucial, and it starts with the young vote.
And I find when people get involved in something, they're going to take it on as part of their life, and they're going to make changes. Now, as you probably know, the theme of this show is coaching America back to greatness. And what really makes that is the culture of this country. Now, I'm a lot older than 39. I'm 87, I might add. I've seen a lot of changes in the culture of this country, and it hadn't always been necessarily for the better. What are the things that you would like to see change in this country for the better?
Well, I think a focus on the family. I think the family is the central unit on which all things kind of flow. I would like a return to the principles that guided us. Look, if you look at the history of the world, I mean, this American experiment is the first time that we didn't need a king to tell us what we needed to do, that we didn't need a king to tell us what God was saying. And so a return or an appreciation, I think, for the wisdom of the Founding Fathers. They didn't just hatch this American experiment out of thin air. They studied it. They looked at the pitfalls and the follies of the great societies and the great countries in our world's history. And they learned the lessons from that when they were forming this government. So we owe it to understand that history. I think an appreciation of that history, a recognition of the family and the importance of family life, of fathers being involved in their child's life, of mothers being involved in their child's life. Those are critical. And if we're going to change the country, I think it starts there. I think it starts in the home, from a spiritual level, from a foundational level, from an educational level. And I think it also goes to an appreciation for where we've come. And this is again, a great American experiment. We've had our flaws and we've had our follies, and we have misstepped as a country before. But every generation has made this a better place. And it is the freest and most prosperous country in the world because of that, because of the sacrifice of so many. So recognizing that, I think, is so critical and appreciating it is so critical to turning the page and turning the tide in this country.
You know, when I was growing up, I was taught to respect for teachers, the law, elders, etc. And I was taught that at home, but it was reinforced in the school. But unfortunately, today it's not taught at home as often as it should be, and certainly not reinforced in the school. But I do believe, if just look at basic things about just doing the right thing, being the best that you can be, helping other people, caring about other people. That's why I admire people in politics like you, because you do it unselfishly, you do it in order to help other people. And I'll tell you what, it's been a pleasure to have you, Mr. Fry, and keep up the good work, and whatever you do, continue to get this college athletics straightened away. God bless you.
Yes, sir, Coach, and what a tremendous honor to be with you on this show. Again, I think the world of what you do and of you as a person, but thanks for this opportunity.
And he walks away after winning his 100th game as the head coach here at Notre Dame.
The reason I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, I was born in this country. It isn't what you have, it's what you're taught about the values of life.
We trying to save souls.
See, there's a rule of life that you're either growing or you're dying.
And like an old friend once said, we as Americans need to start winning again.
Everyone should ask this question. Am I willing to endure the pain and the suffering and the sacrifice it takes to be a champion?